feel like it's particularly appropriate that this theme was chosen by Ukraine. I don't know that I actually thought it through, but the dress I am wearing actually came from Ukraine. So made by internally displaced Ukrainian women. So that feels particularly good today. The theme of pain, Jen said I chose it, and I did, but it wasn't exactly like, yay, let's talk about pain. I'm not that kind of person. It's a challenging topic, and I'm like, how does that tie into creativity? But as Jen and I explored that together, I realized how much my own journey into pain has shaped my expression of creativity as well. So I'm glad you are here with me, and I'm glad to share my journey with you today. Thank you for coming on this chilly Tucson morning in December. Now, every one of us experiences pain in some form. It's human. It's natural. Every one of us, or at least probably many of us, also try to avoid pain or minimize it or mitigate it as much as we can. I think that's also human. I think our bodies are wired that way, like survival. Let's try to not inflict pain on ourselves. But what if, as Rupi Kaur suggests in this simple yet powerful poem on screen, rather than trying to avoid it, we open ourselves to it, because it's going to happen anyway. So with that in mind, I invite you to come on a little journey with me through my journey into pain. And we're going to start by stepping back in time a little bit. The year is 2011, and I am living in Dushanbe, which, if you haven't happened to have heard of it, it is the capital of the country of Tajikistan, which, if you haven't heard of that, happens to be a small country in the middle of Asia, just north of Afghanistan. I have been living there for more than 3 years, and in fact have spent most of the previous 10 years living outside of the United States. In many ways, my life might seem pretty terrific. I'm doing work that aligns with what I thought my calling is, or I think my calling is in the world. That summer, I will celebrate 20 years of marriage to my wife. Together, we have 2 children. One of them is entering their teen years. The younger is rapidly approaching them. And in many ways, things seem to be, if not ideal, certainly good. But inside, I am experiencing this disconnect, this pain, because I am not in alignment with who I am meant to be in this world. But I don't really want to acknowledge that. In fact, I mostly suppress it, try to ignore it, ask God to take it away from me, because to open myself to it, as Rupi invites us, is terrifying, because that could mean disrupting everything that I have created with my life. Now, at this time, my life hardly feels creative. In fact, I would say I probably don't really have any particularly creative outlets. First of all, I'm hesitant. I'm scared. I'm afraid of failure. I don't know if anybody can relate to that, but failure is not something I'm real excited about. So I don't tend to try things unless I feel pretty confident I'm going to succeed at it, which, not surprisingly, really limits how many things I'm willing to try. Of course, I am living in Tajikistan, so there's something about that. But the living in Tajikistan also pretty severely limits creative outlet, because life in Tajikistan is hard. And just getting by day takes most of my energy. So life isn't exactly what I would say is a creative outlet at that point. But, it's not terrible. It's just that, there's a voice inside me calling me to something more, something different. But I am not ready to listen to that voice and step into the unknown. The universe, in the way that it sometimes does in our lives, decides to give me a little push, kick me in the and send me on a different journey. Although I had intended and expected to remain in Tajikistan indefinitely, that summer I suddenly find myself crash landing back in the United States for various reasons, and my carefully constructed life and my sense of who I am crumble overnight. I'm lost. My life is in pieces on the floor around me, and I don't know how to put those pieces back together again. At this point, I could try to rebuild a life along the lines of the one that I have lived for the previous 40 plus years. I know how to do that. I still have my family. I still have my religious faith that has shaped and molded most of my decisions up to this point in my life. I could probably figure a way to put it back together, but I would still be out of alignment with this thing, this pain inside myself that says you're not in alignment with who you really are. So alternatively, I could step into that pain and explore it. But as I mentioned, that's terrifying. Do I dare take that risk? Around that time, I encounter the writings of Brené Brown, whom you may be familiar with, and in particular, this book on screen, Daring Greatly. This book was transformational for me, and if you have not read it, I certainly encourage you to consider doing so. Brené Brown invited me in multiple ways in this book and other writings to consider stepping into this darkness, this pain within me, and seeing what I might find there. Now, initially, as I consider this, I don't dare greatly, to be quite honest. I dare timidly, hesitantly, because daring greatly, that's a big task. And also, I am afraid. I am afraid that if I step into that darkness, into that pain, I am going to lose what remains of my life. As I said, my life has shattered in pieces around me. I'm holding on to a few remnants. If I step into this, I may lose those as well. I am not confident that if I own the woman within me, my wife is going to stay with me and continue this journey of life, as much as I hope she will. I'm even less confident that my social world is going to stay with me because it's mostly centered around my church, and my church pretty conservative. So I'm hesitant, I'm timid. For the next 4 years, I create a double life, living two different worlds. I'm over here exploring this woman within, but secretively, hesitatingly, when I don't think I'm being seen by anyone, because I am not ready for her to be seen by the outside world. And on the other side, I'm recreating a life that's along the lines of the one I've lived in the past 40 years, because, well, you gotta live, you gotta put food on the table, you gotta find your way forward. And I do okay, actually. I find a new job that works, and my oldest child finishes high school, goes off to college. My youngest child enters high school. My wife and I buy a house. On the surface, life is good. What would I have to complain about? But inside, I am in turmoil. I'm in pain because I am totally out of sync with who I am. Now, by late 2015, I have a pretty good clarity. This person, the woman within me, is really who I am, who I need to be in this world. But I still have not been willing to share that with a single soul in the world because I am so afraid of rejection if I embrace that. If I open it up, nobody's going to like me. Nobody's going to accept me. Until one night, after ballet class, which is an activity I had started in that interim 4 years, I'm I'm in a text conversation with one of my classmates. And the conversation leads to a point where I am confronted with an opportunity to own who I am to her, first person ever, or to deny it and just decide I'm going to just go back to suppressing that and pretend that doesn't exist, and I'm going to stick with the old life. It's a fork in the road. Which fork do I take? Well, you can see me standing here on stage, so you probably can, reach a decision on that pretty easily. I did. I took the risk. And I stepped into my darkness, my pain, to find out what would be. But I did not know at that moment what's going to be on the other side. As much as I appreciate Brené Brown's words here, when you step into the darkness, you don't always know that there's going to be light on the other side. But I found acceptance from that classmate, which was, as I said, not what I'd expected. And I thought, if one person accepts me, maybe there are others who will accept me. Maybe I will not spend the rest of my life utterly alone. And that may sound like a hyperbole, but I really, deep in my heart, was very afraid that that's what I'm going to end up with. So it was very freeing to find out that maybe, just maybe, there's going to be people out there that will actually accept and love me. Now, stepping into that more fully, completely, and saying, this, Andrea, this is who I am, was liberating. It also didn't eliminate pain from my life, just to be clear. In fact, the year after I came out and began to publicly transition was one of the most difficult in my entire life, even more than the year I crash landed from coming back from Tajikistan, which was also hard. My wife divorced me. I lost the job I had when I came out because they weren't real cool on me being me. I lost my house because without a wife and without a job, I couldn't afford it. I lost most of my social world, all these things that I had feared. Fortunately, my parents did not cut me out of their life. I'm really grateful for that. In fact, they made sure I had food and a roof over my head. Wouldn't possibly be here today if they hadn't. My kids actually also stuck with me. And in fact, as I stepped into my own authenticity, it actually gave them encouragement, support to step into their own authenticity, which has been so beautiful, but that is their stories. My sister, who lives here in town, cut me out of her life completely, will not let me see her children, so I have no interaction with my nieces and nephews because I'm apparently a contaminant that might cause them to, I don't know, be themselves. I reached a point in 2016. I had no money, I had no job, I was finding no job prospects, I had virtually no social world. And I was suicidal. Which may not sound like much of an encouragement, but it's where I was, and I'm going to be honest about that, because stepping into the darkness and unleashing the power of my light also put me in an entirely new world with no support, no roadmap, no idea how to make this work. I was on my own. I had to create an entirely new life, and I had to do it from the ground up, and it was fucking hard. During those years, I mentioned a ballet class. Well, my dance studio, after I came out, became my community. Thank you, Todd Wilson and Breakout Studios. Yay, Todd. Yes. Told myself I wasn't going to get emotional. Ha. I had a desk job at the studio, which paid no money, but allowed me to take unlimited classes, and I literally did. I was there every day the studio was open. I would take 2 or 3 classes, and honestly, it saved my life because it gave me a way to connect with my body, and it gave me a way to express the emotions that threatened to overwhelm me almost every day. I had started with ballet, I tried jazz, I tried modern, I tried lyrical, I tried femme, I even tried tap dancing, which is really hard. And dance became a central part of who I am. Love dancing. Then in early 2017, I attended the first Women's Comedy Festival hosted by Tucson Improv Movement. I was hoping Justin would be here, but he didn't make it today. And I went the first night because I just got to get out of my apartment or I'm going to go stir crazy. I want something to do. Cool, this looks interesting. Thought I'd go to one show. I went to every show of every night of the 3 days of the performance, went to everything, because it was really interesting. I encountered storytelling and stand-up and improv, and they all intrigued me, and they all terrified me, because I saw in them this possibility of way to be creative and express myself in the world, to share with the world what it's like to be me in this world. But man, to get on stage by yourself in front of a microphone, way too vulnerable, way too vulnerable. But you know what? When you have stepped into your deepest pain, your darkest fear, and you've come out on the other side and found out that there is still a life beyond that, that is actually now more open, more possible, it really liberates you to try things. Because what's the worst possible thing that could happen? If I get on stage in front of a microphone, I might fail, I might look stupid, but hey, that's not nearly as painful as coming out to the world as the woman you are. And I decided to give that a try. Let's try something. So I decided storytelling would be the way I start. And 2 months after that comedy festival, I shared my first story with female storytellers, or FIST. And if you have not checked out a FIST show, you absolutely should. I think they're the second Tuesday of the month right now, but check them out. Now, this is the first time I've ever done something like that, and as my time to do the show approached, I was number 6 in 6 people in that show, which meant I had to wait through 5 previous storytellers, growing increasingly anxious with every one of them, because I'm going to get up there and tell this personal story. I was pacing the green room in, trying to wear a hole in the floor, and this was in the days of the Flycatcher. If anybody remembers Flycatcher, their green room was like a broom closet, so it was like, you know. But when I walked on stage and I started telling my story, which, much like this, was really the story of coming out, the warmth that I received from that audience and the support was exhilarating. It was euphoric. It lifted me up, and I'm like, oh, I want that rush again. And even as I left the stage that night, I was like, when can I do another show? I've since gone on to share 8 more stories with FIST over the years since then, as well as stories with Odyssey and other storytelling groups. And it's a powerful art form. And if you haven't tried it, maybe give it a shot. As was mentioned, I also do comedy. Storytelling was like a gateway drug for me. Stand-up intrigued me, but terrified me even more than storytelling, because it's one thing to get in front of an audience and tell a story. It's another thing to get in front of an audience and try to make them laugh. I had an opportunity to join an all-female comedy show called The Estrogen Hour. And as with FIST, I was terrified. I actually had to call a friend before the show to talk me through my anxiety so that I could actually drive to laughs and do the show. I was that nervous. But as with FIST, once I got on stage and felt the audience's energy, and I did actually get them to laugh, which was helpful, I was like, I don't know what it would have been like if they hadn't laughed. That might have been a very different route. But it was euphoric as well. And I'm like, I want to do more of that. So as you can see here in the slide, I now do stand-up around town regularly, including right on this stage. And I've even done some shows up in Phoenix. Maybe one of these days I'll go beyond. We'll see. My latest adventure, as Jen mentioned, is improv, which is interesting because it brings my story, in a sense, full circle. Because I'm now taking improv classes at TEM. And I love it. I love it. It's so fun. It's way more fun than stand-up, actually. Because stand-up, you're up there and it's all you, and it's on you to make this happen. In improv is collaborative. You're up there with somebody else or other people. And in a sense, you can't fail because you've got other people carrying each other. I'm excited to do more of that. And if you haven't tried improv, Tim offers classes. And I don't even work for him, so I'm not getting anything out of that, except maybe you'll find some outlet that you didn't know you would want. But my story wouldn't be complete if I don't mention the creative activity that brings me the greatest joy. And Jen mentioned it in the intro. In summer of 2022, at the invitation of a friend from my ballet class, I joined Lyconic, which is a Polish folk dance group based here in Tucson. So I, who 10 years ago timidly put her foot into the first ballet class of her life, which is what everybody does in their 40s, right? They try ballet? You should do it. You might be surprised. Here I am now performing with Lyconic around the country, and this summer we even performed at an international festival in Poland. So cool. Now, being part of a performing dance company, which is something I'd never done, is exhilarating. It is exhausting. We rehearse a hell of a lot, which is good for the health, I guess. But it's super rewarding. And it's something I never would have considered doing in my old life if I hadn't stepped into that pain. And that's really the point I want to make today. None of these things would have happened if I had not, I'll say it, if I had not had the courage to explore my pain and explore my darkness and see what lie on the other side of it. I could have probably made a life continue to work in my old form, but I wouldn't have been whole. I wouldn't have been living authentically. I wouldn't have been in touch with really who I am. And I wouldn't have met the really amazing, friends who fill my life. And I wouldn't be doing all these things that are so cool. Life still has pain. It didn't go away. They're different now. I've addressed that pain. So there are other ones, though. I'm sure I will have them the rest of my life. I'm trying to be more cognizant of them and more conscious about how I choose to engage them. I try not to let them limit me, though sometimes I do still. I'm human. But I try to see them as invitations to step into the unknown and see what happens, because you'll never know if you don't try. So I want to leave you with a quotation from a book I particularly enjoy, one you may or very likely haven't heard of, called The Holy Wild, and I always forget the title, should know it better. The Holy Wild, A Heathen Bible for the Untamed Woman. It's a good book. I really enjoyed it. And I'm going to read this quotation, even though it's on screen, and I don't have it memorized, so I'm going to pull it up here. Danielle Dulski writes, "Pain is not tragic. Pain is magic. Suffering is tragic. Suffering is what happens when we avoid pain and consequently miss our becoming. That is what I can and must avoid. Missing my own evolution because I am too afraid to surrender to the process. So my goal is to stop abandoning myself and stay. To trust that I'm strong enough to handle the pain that is necessary to the process of becoming. Because what scares me a hell of a lot more than pain is living my entire life and missing my becoming." I return to the slide that I started with, and if you recall, initially I put it as untitled. It actually does have a title. The title is Becoming Me, because I made that thing. It took me 5 years. The first 5 years of my transition, I worked on this. And so it represents me becoming me, the dancer, the woman, the person you see on stage before you. So thank you for listening. I welcome your interaction. I know we're going to have some questions and discussion time, but if you'd like to connect with me, here are some various channels that you can do so. Grab me afterwards as well. And in the meantime, I'm going to pass it over to our co-host, beautiful Emily here.